This is the Made for Success podcast, and this is Chris Widener, speaker and author of over 15 books, including the New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestseller, The Angel Inside. The Made for Success podcast will help you turn your potential into performance, succeed in every area of your life, and achieve your dreams. And now, enjoy the show.
Our guest today is Dino Rossi. Dino is a successful businessman who has been in the commercial real estate business for 22 years, and he's also the co-founder of the Eastside Commercial Bank, founded in 2002. Dino was elected to the Washington State Senate in 1996, and by his third year, he was deputy leader and the lead Republican on the budget writing Ways and Means Committee. He was re-elected in 2000 with nearly 70% of the vote. Dino's appealed to a broad base of voters with his straight talk on government reform and accountability, jobs and economic growth, as well as the importance of bipartisanship, allowed him to be the twice certified winner of the 2004 Washington State governor's race before a third recount switched the results of the election by the narrowest of margins. Senator John McCain has stated that Dino Rossi proves in the political world you can be fiscally conservative and still have a social conscience. Welcome, Dino.
Oh, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, good to have you here.
Great to be here.
You know, occasionally I have people in who I've never met before, and I get to meet them, and of course we've heard of them, etc. But you've been a long time, real good friend of mine, and so I'm excited about letting a lot of other people know about the person that I already know.
Well, thanks for having me. We've been friends since before I actually ever run for office before.
Yeah. It's been fun to see how your career has moved along and how you've succeeded, and you know, the show is really designed to help people see other people who've lived successful lives, and you've been successful in family, and you've been successful in business and real estate and banking, and you've been successful in politics, and so I thought we'd just spend 55 minutes or so just talking about that type of stuff. What does it take to become a successful person? And that's what we're going to talk about. But I want to start out with one of the things that we said just last there as we introduced you, was you can be fiscally conservative and still have a social conscience. Tell us about that. I mean, what does that mean? Is that just political speak or what?
Well, it really isn't political speak. When I was elected to the Senate, which was 1996, moved my way through the ranks, and in 2003, the Senate Republicans, we got the majority in the state Senate. You know, timing's everything in life. And when I became chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, going to write the budget for the state of Washington, I've been working up to that level for some time. I got to be chairman during the largest dollar deficit in Washington State history.
Wow.
Lucky me.
So what's the overall budget?
It was about $23 billion. We had a $2.8 billion hole in the budget.
Wow.
And so, you know, unfortunately, though, what was happening is that the governor had proposed some cuts, and just horrendous cuts to people with developmental disabilities and mentally ill and people in nursing homes. And I mean, you think about those folks, and you know, and there, but for the grace of God, go you and I. And I said, you know, number one, I wasn't going to raise taxes because I believed it would harm the economy and throw people out of work. But number two, I was going to do everything I could to protect those, you know, most vulnerable people in our society.
Sure.
Because I just really believe that you could be fiscally conservative and still have a social conscience. Now, the first, just less than a month after I became the new chairman with a big problem, we went to the Associated Press Forum, which is where the TV cameras show up and the radio and the newspaper folks all show up, and they all grill the leaders as to what are you going to do about whatever problem of the day is. They all wanted to hear from me. Because I'd always talked about not raising taxes, and that really had never been done in our lifetime, where they had a fiscal problem and they didn't raise taxes. And so I stood up and I said that. I said, I'm not going to raise taxes because I believe it'll harm the economy, throw people out of work. I said, but I'm going to do everything I can to protect the most vulnerable. Now, when I got off the stage, my Ways and Means staff, which consisted of about 15 budget analysts and lawyers, nonpartisan staff, who worked for the Democrats when they were in charge and worked for the Republicans when we were in charge, they took me aside, two of the guys who ran the staff for me. They said, and they've been down there 20 years, and they said, now, Senator, you really don't have any illusions any of this stuff's going to pass to you. You know, that's my own staff.
Time out. Let's tell you how this is really going to work, right?
Yeah, that was my own staff. I said, well, you know, have some faith. This is part of the, you know, having that positive attitude. I said, have some faith. You know, let's work through these problems. Here's where I want to go and what I want to do. Every day they sat down and tried to talk some common sense into me. They thought it's got to be half cuts and half taxes because that's the way we've always done it.
Right.
And every day I said, we're not raising taxes. Finally, on that Friday, at the end of the week, the first week, I sat them down. I said, and I found that you can say pretty much anything you want in this world if you say it with a smile on your face.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want anybody talking about raising taxes again. And now I know you're all been NPR listening to liberals, but I think you're sufficiently cynical enough to be of service to me. They laughed, and they took it in good, they knew me quite well.
Right.
But the point is that they didn't talk about taxes again. Yeah. And the framework was, which I had set out, which was not raising taxes, but protecting the most vulnerable people. In the end, as we started going through the process, all the things that everybody said was impossible to do, we achieved. People, the newspapers and the people in the know in the state capitol thought there's no way we're going to achieve what we're going to achieve. We were outnumbered. Senate Republicans had a 1-vote majority in the Senate. Democrats controlled the House and Democrat governor. And as we were getting successful on one piece of legislation after another, my nonpartisan Ways and Means staff just got invigorated with this degree of success that they were having. All these things that they wanted to do for years, they weren't allowed to do because no one was willing to sell it.
Yeah.
And I said, if it made good public policy, it saves us money, and I can explain it, I'll do it. Because I have to make up $2.8 billion. And it was amazing, the creativity that came from these people when I freed them up and supported them as the leader of writing the budget, the guy in the crosshairs. Because every move you make, you're making it with a TV camera in your face or the radio microphone in your face. Every move you make. If you parted your hair a different way in one day, it would probably make it somewhere into the news because people were focused on this big problem.
Dino parts hair on
left. Exactly. What does that mean? What does that mean? And so in the end, we accomplished those goals, which were I ended up receiving the Defender of Liberty Award from the Evergreen Freedom Foundation for having a fiscally conservative budget, the slowest growing budget in Washington state history. But I also, something I'm equally proud of, though, 6 different awards from the developmentally disabled community for protecting their funding. The funding we protected for the mentally ill as well, just to make sure that safety net, those people that we really should be helping, were protected. And I'm very equally as proud of that. So what Senator McCain was saying is that we proved it's not just talk, it's not political rhetoric. We did it. We proved that you can be fiscally conservative and still have a social conscience. Now, was it easy? Absolutely not. It was a lot of work and effort to get to that point, and it was done in a bipartisan fashion, which is rare in politics. And that's why a lot of people encourage me to run for governor.
Yeah. In the midst of running for governor, we're going to talk about that a little bit later, but in the midst of running for governor in 2004, starting late 2003 throughout 2004, the Wall Street Journal ran an article that focused primarily on 2 primary people, Barack Obama, who's now a senator from Illinois, and then a guy named Dino Rossi, who, and they basically said this is the kind of person who's going to be the future of politics. These are good representatives from 2 different parties and the new breed of political figure and that type of thing. So then you go throughout the rest of the campaign, and for the nationwide audience that is watching, tell us how that ended and how that has affected you and what kinds of lessons you've learned from that.
From the governor's race?
From the governor's race, yeah.
Well, the governor's race, in the end, just to fill people in, we were certified the winner twice, and before a hand recount overturned it by 129 votes, closest governor's race in American history.
So first election, the first time they did it, you won by
261 votes.
261 votes. Then they automatic recount. Right. Recount comes in, and the winning
by 43.
43 votes. Okay. So then what happens?
Well, and then MoveOn.org and some of the others paid for what was allowed by law, a hand recount. And in the hand recount, they overturned the election by 129 votes. And so, when we reflect upon what happened in the end, there's a lot of things that happened. There were, in King County, there were hundreds more votes that they counted than they could attribute to any human beings that actually voted. So we thought, a simple standard, well, maybe every vote should have a voter.
Right.
Wasn't too much to ask for it. Sure. And so we went through an election contest, and the judge in the end was just, unwilling to overturn the election. But my wife and I reflected upon, all that happened during the course of the campaign, and it was a great experience. It really was, all the way throughout, with the wonderful people that we met across the state. And when you think about what we accomplished in our race, there were 168,000 people that voted for John Kerry that did not vote for my opponent. There's tens of thousands of Democrats that cross party lines. I run into them every day, everywhere I go.
Dinocrats.
They call themselves Dinocrats. Yeah, I am still a Democrat, but I'm voting for you. And we were just really proud of that fact that we opened it all up to anybody who wanted to help turn our state around, and that was our goal. And so we ran, in our state, we ran 8 points ahead of the president and 10 points ahead of our U.S. Senate candidate. And and this is in a state that hasn't elected a Republican governor in 24 years, which was part of the remarkable part of it.
Yeah.
And so, but we learned a lot of different things, obviously, but obviously perseverance in something like this, and also how you handle it. Because there were all sorts of irregularities in the balloting. In my book, I talk about being an international election observer in the 2002 Macedonian parliamentary elections.
Yeah.
And it was an interesting process because before I went off to Macedonia, I wanted to find a little bit more about it, so I looked on the internet. And I found, the dress and the culture and all these sorts of things. And there was a little travel advisory button that I said, well, I better hit that. And so I hit the travel advisory, and a big long sentence with a comma in the middle, and it said, take with you some sunscreen because it could be hot and you could get a sunburn. It said, comma, and beware of shelling on the northern border. Apparently of equal importance.
You could get sunburned, you could be shot.
Yeah, 1600 SPF for that, I guess. Anyway, and so when I went over there, though, it was interesting because these people are really new to democracy, new to what we all, unfortunately, many times take for granted, and so they were just so engaged in what they were doing. 26 different political parties, and what I contrasted what I saw there with what I saw in our race. And how 26 parties, but they all got to watch the process. None of them trust each other, which is a good thing because they watch the process together.
Right.
It's good to have people that don't trust each other watching the process. And so that, but what they were willing to do to get to that point, the lives and that were lost to fight for the freedoms that we unfortunately take for granted.
Right.
It was an amazing process over there. And I compared it to King County, where it's a third of the population of the state, about 60% Democrat, about 40% Republican, and it was clear, which is one of the reasons why the state party hadn't contested the election, where the Democrat Party activists were all given the ballots to take home with them because they're the only ones that can be election inspectors in King County are Democrat Party activists.
Right.
They're given all the blank ballots to take home with them on the Friday before the election, and then they have no record how many ballots they dropped off on the Tuesday of Election Day, and no records how many are left over. That's how you end up with more ballots than you can actually attribute to human beings.
Right.
So, but what we found and how we handled it, we want to watch. My wife and I talked about this because everything started going south, and all these irregularities with felons voting and all these things, dead people voting, all these things that came out in the end. And we realized that with our 4 children, we have 4 children, 15, 12, 9, and 5. And that they watch everything we do, every single thing at home or in public. That kids are going to watch everything we do. So we never yelled, we never screamed, we never did anything like throw chairs, nothing like that, because we didn't want, definitely, obviously it was frustrating as you watched it being manipulated away, but I didn't want my children to be, to be bitter or angry.
Sure.
So consequently, since the election was all done, they aren't bitter and angry, they're doing fine. Yeah. But I guess the reality in the end is that you can handle anything, no matter how difficult or unfair, with grace and dignity. And the kids are asking me, when they see something like, these ballots they can't attribute to human beings, or after they stopped counting and they couldn't count anymore, they found ballots that came from areas that I had won that were never counted, and kids will say, well, that's not fair. And I got to kind of explain to them some things in life are not fair. Yeah. And and the only fair the Rossi family will see this year is the state fair of Puyallup.
The state fair.
That might be it.
It is interesting, and it's such a great life lesson. And one of the things that has been amazing to watch you were in our home when the judge said that he was not going to let the suit go further or whatever. And people will ask me, they'll say, how is he? And what's interesting to me is I think other people took the reaction worse than you did. And that's really true about people. They can be devastated by a loss, whether it's an athletic event or a business might go bankrupt, or, all the different things that happen. Life happens, and life isn't fair. As much as we didn't believe it when Mom told it to us, right. It isn't. And it's been neat to see the resilience that you've shown, and Terry and the kids, not only in the face of a loss, but a very, very public loss, not only here, but nationally it was shown.
Let's take a 20-second break to thank our sponsor, Made for Success Publishing. For listeners of this show, visit madeforsuccess.com/podcast and enjoy half off of the world's most popular personal development audiobooks. Use coupon code SUCCESS at checkout for a 50% savings. Now, back to the Made for Success podcast show.
What do you do to make sure that things don't devastate you? What do you do on the other side? Okay, your business has just failed, or your wife has just left you, or some devastating thing has taken place. You've lost an election that the whole country watched. Mm-hmm. How do you make it beyond that?
Well, I tell you, the first time I ran for office was 1992. And in 92 in Washington State, it was the year of the Democrat, year of the woman, year of pretty much everything but Dino. And I lost by 1,051 votes. And we were actually sure we actually lost that race. Yeah. And when you run for public office, you put your name on the placard for your friends and neighbors to go thumbs up or thumbs down. You put your heart and soul into campaigning. Everything that you do, it's just focused on trying to accomplish that goal. When I lost, I kind of moped around the house for a week or two, kind of licking my wounds a bit.
Which I'm sure Terry didn't tolerate much.
No, and that's one of the greatest blessings of my life. Terry and I have been married 18 years, and she just said, okay, enough moping around, number one. Pal. Exactly, you've had 2 weeks, that's enough. But she gave me a couple of pieces of advice that were kind of life-changing in a lot of ways. During the campaign, in my 92 campaign, I had some people that did some pretty nasty things in the campaign to me, and putting out anonymous smear pieces in church parking lots and anonymous smear pieces all over the place, telling things that were not true. Yeah. There's just some ugly things that happen, and so I was a little angry, a little bitter, a little upset about it. And my wife said, the first thing is have faith, because everything in your life has always worked out for the best, and this will be no different. Mm. Okay, I can do that. And she was right. Everything in my life has always worked out for the best, no matter what, and that would be no different. The next thing she advised me to do, which was, it's so much easier to say than do, it's really hard to do, is she said, pray for your enemies. Mm. That's a lot more difficult than it sounds, especially if you feel like you've been wrong. But what, in the end, what it did was it shed me of all the bitterness and anger and hatred that can just eat you up inside and keep you from going forward. And then, in the end, also, I came back 4 years later and defeated the same person, the incumbent, that I had lost to. Mm-hmm. And those people who were against me, who did the things that were somewhat nasty in the first campaign, went neutral in the next campaign. Mm-hmm. And then they were actually supporters in the 2000 campaign. Mm-hmm. Personally, that bit of advice was something that really was life-changing, and getting past some of these things. Because what you can do is you just chew yourself up inside. Yeah. If you internalize and keep it in, that how you've been wronged or what have you, and it serves really no purpose. Yeah. Absolutely no purpose whatsoever. Because life is good, and there are so many different blessings that you get.
So how can you be a realist and an optimist at the same time? Because, really, you have to look at situations realistically, regardless of what they are. Yeah. But yet, and if they're not necessarily good, you can still be an optimist. There is life after a loss, Right. How do you do that? How do you refocus your mind? Like, what do you do to say, okay, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm not going to dwell on that. I'm going to make something better?
Well, what I did was I turned the focus to my family, and spent a lot more time with Terry and the kids, and that was good. Also to the commercial real estate business. And then, decided to write a book. You encouraged me to write a book, and I did, and that was good. And so that's all those things. I diverted my attention elsewhere. Realized that was a chapter that's done. If I run for governor again, we'll make that decision in 2007. If it's right for the family, that's where we start with the first question is, if it's right for the family. We'll decide that then. But you got to be able to move past these things. And
refocusing,
redirecting in a positive way, not in a bitter, angry or spiteful way, but in a very positive way.
Yeah.
And good things are happening, and good things will continue happening. Like my wife said, have faith.
Yeah.
Everything in life has always worked out for the best.
Yeah. Sometimes I ask my audiences, how many of you have thought about writing a book? And I mean, it's 70% and above.
Sure.
They go up, right? And so now you've written a book. Dino Rossi.
And I wouldn't have put my hand up because I thought I'd be writing a book.
Lessons in leadership, business, politics, and life. And we're going to talk about some of those lessons you learned. But what was the process like? I mean, how did you write a book?
Well, I'd never done it before.
Right.
And
you had never wanted to.
No. And you and I had talked about all these different things that I'd done in the commercial real estate business, and also in the just life lessons along the way from family and then the legislature, and then running for governor, all of these various things. And so I just sat down and broke it up into chunks. Wrote out about 20 different chapter titles, and then figured out a dozen of them I would like to write about, and outlined it, told my stories, had it into a recorder, had it transcribed, and I used that as the outline to write the book.
Yeah.
And then you were so gracious to add a few paragraphs at the end of each chapter how you apply this life lesson to your business and family life. I'm getting great feedback from this part that you contributed to the book as well. And so I didn't want to write a book just to write a book.
Sure.
I thought, well, maybe if some of these lessons are ones that can help other people. They're not all success stories,
sure.
But they are things that actually happen to people in life, and you can apply it to your business and family life.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to do. Yeah. And so from that, we're finding a lot of common ground with people when I go out and speak. I do a lot of speaking, various engagements. I mean, during the campaign, I gave 1,200 speeches in a year.
I know.
That's a lot of speeches.
You make a lot of professional speakers look like they're not working much.
I know. And it was, but now I get to take a little more time with the speeches and really wrap it all up into these various lessons that hopefully can help other people, that people find entertaining some of these lessons. Yeah.
So give us a snapshot of your life, because we want to focus in on what you've done to be able to be successful. And then let's loop back and let's kind of go through it, and you can tell us more some of the stories that you've learned and lessons. Where'd you grow up? What did you do before you got into politics?
Well, the grandparents came here from Italy around town at the turn of the last century, settled in Black Diamond, Washington. My grandpa was a coal miner. And you own the Black Diamond Museum, Grandpa's two-man saws up on the wall. My mom's side's from Alaska. My mom's was from Klawock, Alaska. And so I'm the youngest of 7 kids raised on a school teacher's salary, and thought everybody drank powdered milk, it was just normal. And we had a great life, though. We grew up in just north of Seattle, about a half hour north of Seattle, and and behind our house, cows, chickens, and horses, and we go fishing on the weekends with our friends, and it was a great way to grow up. My folks couldn't afford to pay for me to go to college, but I really wanted to go to college, and so I decided to work my way through college, work construction, a number of different jobs. But main job, I took a janitorial job. So I waxed floors at the Space Needle, the Seattle, the Seattle Space Needle. At night, I worked 6 days a week. I worked from about 2 in the morning till about 8 in the morning. My first class started at 9, and I got Tuesday nights off. So it was quite a grind, but I wanted to make it through school. All my life, people have told me that I couldn't achieve what I was going to achieve. You're not going to go to school because you folks can't afford to pay for it. You're never going to get elected to the Senate. That's just never going to happen. You're not going to balance the budget without raising taxes. It's just not possible. You're never going to be successful at running for governor. All these things all along my life, people have said you aren't going to be able to do. We proved them wrong. And it was just sheer perseverance. I got into the commercial real estate business. How that happened, I I graduated from Seattle University with a degree in business management. Then I sold everything I had so I could travel. And I traveled to Southeast Asia. Before I left, though, I left $200 in the bank so I had something to fall back on. I didn't want to come back broke.
Back when $200 meant something.
Yeah, right. and when I came back after 9 months of traveling in Singapore, Indonesia, and Malaysia. And when I got back, my brother, he gave me a title to a car. He said, "You get it started, it's yours." So I put a battery and a starter in it, and I had a $200 car and $200 in the bank. I took a janitorial job at night so I could survive, and I sold commercial real estate during the day, and sold apartment complexes in the Seattle area. A year and a half later, when I was 25 years old, I had been successful enough as a salesman to where I had almost enough for a down payment on an apartment building. I actually had to put the last $2,000 of the down payment on a credit card to buy the variable interest rate down to 11.5%.
Oh, wow.
This is in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
And but you know, I mean, I was looking at the last can of beans in the cupboard when a year and a half earlier, I had absolutely nowhere to go but up, and is the way I looked at it. And I was putting in 12-hour days and working very hard. And when I got into the business too, when the interest rates were so high, the first apartment buildings I sold for people, the first 3 buildings I sold for people, I sold for less than what they paid for them 3 years earlier, 3 or 4 years earlier. And they were kissing me because they were getting rid of the negative cash flow. Because markets go up and down. But I didn't know the difference between a good market and a bad market.
Because you were 25.
Right, 25, and I wasn't in the good market. But I was sitting next to a lot of people who were in the order-taking time when all you had to do was just answer the phone and you'd make a bunch of money. And after I made a couple of deals, the kid got lucky. I made a couple more transactions closed. The kid really got lucky. And then after like my 4th or 5th, a lot of them quit. Because they were still sitting there staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring. Yeah. It doesn't ring.
Right.
In a market like that, you have to actually show the initiative and willing to go out there and do what needs to be done to get in front of people and figure out how you can help them all be successful. And so that experience was tremendous experience. Because what did I do for a living? I negotiated $1 million real estate transactions with powerful people and their lawyers on both sides. I didn't get paid unless I got them to agree. No salary, no benefits. You don't work, you don't eat. That's how the commercial real estate business works. And so it was really a good training ground, because I translated some of the things I learned in the commercial real estate business into politics. When within my first 6 months of being in the commercial real estate business, a sales manager of mine named Leon Moore, he took me aside. He saw me with a couple of clients. He took me aside. He said, you never ever calculate the commission before the transaction's completed. And he said, because the buyer and seller would just sense you're just working for yourself. He says, your job is to help both those people be successful. If you help them be successful, you can't help but be successful in the end. It was great advice.
And it's amazing how many times I have people sit here, very successful people, and they say the exact same thing. Help others.
Help others be successful within the framework of the goals that you're trying to achieve. And it's just not willy-nilly here or there, but you have to be focused. But I was helping them be successful. And he was right, and that's exactly what I did. Now, the strange thing is I took that and I translated that into politics, which is kind of rare. So when I started working across party lines to solve some of the problems with the budget, I met with, before session started, I hopped in my car and drove around the state and met with moderate Democrats.
This is when you were having to bring that budget deficit down.
Right, the 2.8
And you knew you were going to have Democrats come over and work with you. You didn't have the numbers to do it yourself, just your party.
That's exactly right.
You had to work with the other side.
I had no choice if I were going to be successful.
Right, if you're going to be successful. So, tell what you did.
So I got in my car, drove around the state, met with moderate Democrat senators before session started in their hometowns, in their living rooms, and I just said, look, I think number one, here's the problem. I outlined the problem. I said, I think this problem is just too big for one party to solve. Will you help me? And then within that framework, I said, now here's what I'm doing. I'm not raising taxes. I'm going to protect the poor and the vulnerable. Now, how can I help you be successful?
Within that framework.
Within that framework.
We're not going to raise taxes, and we're going to still help the poor and the vulnerable.
That's right. Now, how can I help you be successful? And the reactions were varied. Some people were very welcoming because they never had anybody, none of them really had anybody come to them, even come to their hometown. Any senator who was chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, which is really probably the most powerful position in the state, right behind governor. Come to their hometown and ask them how they can help them be successful. What ended up happening in the end, to pass that big budget, I had to pass 50 different separate bills that changed laws, changed statutes. And these 50 different bills had to pass or that budget wasn't going to work. So in the end, we passed the budget because of working across party lines, people, trying to help other people be successful. It passed, and those 50 bills passed, and not a single one of them passed on a party line partisan vote. Huh. People have been down there 30 years, so they'd never seen anything like it before. But it gets back to, how am I going to help other people be successful within the framework that I've laid out? And it was achieved. And that was what was so remarkable about some of the things. But it's just basic, simple ideas that an old sales manager gave me a long time ago that seemed to work in the commercial real estate business, but certainly worked in politics too.
Thanks for listening to the Made for Success podcast. Get to know us at madeforsuccess.com/podcast. Meet the hosts of the Made for Success podcast and pick up a free copy of the Totally Motivated ebook by Chris Widener. We will see you next time on the Made for Success podcast.